All right. Let me bang the gavel. Welcome, everybody, to our Beverly School Committee meeting of the whole. Today is Wednesday, February 27th, 2019, and we're going to start off our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we have a flag right over here. And Mrs. Visnick, would you lead us in the pledge, please? Oh, did I? I'm sorry.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mrs. Visnick. I try to keep track. I guess I missed it. All right. Before we begin our meeting, we have 5 sets of minutes to approve. So let's start off with our January 9th regular school committee meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any changes needed for those?
No.
All those in favor? 7-0. Thank you. Okay, January 30th, 2019, our committee of the whole. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Ferretti. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. Any changes needed for those? Looking to my wordsmith over here.
Oh, I've seen these.
Yeah. All those in favor? 7-0. Great. All right. February 11th, 2019, our committee of the whole meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Zabel. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Ferretti. Any changes to those? All those in favor? 7-0. And February 13th, 2019, our committee of the whole meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Visnick. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Ferretti. All those, any changes? All those in favor? 7-0. Keeping up, Stephanie. Okay. And then February 14th, 2019, Committee of the Whole meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Visnick.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Ferretti. Any changes to those? Okay, all those in favor? Great. That was sort of like a city council meeting. All right. So the next item on our agenda is a discussion and decision on our superintendent candidates. So first of all, I'd like to start off with thanking our community in general for everybody who volunteered to be available for forums, for our custodial staff who shuffled furniture back and forth so many times for us. Thank you to BevCam for taping and making interviews accessible and available to the public. Thank you to Mrs. Bergeron, who's sitting in the audience, for making sure every detail was attended to, making sure we had cookies and water and all the things all the many, many details. I'd also like to point out Mrs. Ferretti for her chauffeur services, bringing the candidates through their day in the district, and for John Harmon, our Director of Human Resources, for keeping us on track and minding the time for us. And for the building principals, all of you, thank you for adjusting your day and accommodating all of the candidates traipsing through your buildings. Even with the snow schedule change, we appreciate your flexibility. Mr. Brackett, John Brackett, and his team at the Collins Center for keeping us extremely organized and on track and on time. And it's really wonderful to be here tonight thinking about this vote. And even though it snowed once, we're not really, we're on our schedule, which is wonderful. And then everybody in the community who took time to attend forums, who took time to sit at home and watch the interviews, who sent us emails and communicated with us and shared feedback with us. That the variety of feedback that we got really was helpful. And if there was anybody I missed, I just want to remind us that this process really took the village. And thank you to everybody's support and your participation in this process. So the school committee has received a lot of information about each of the candidates, and in addition to hearing their interviews, we also had the opportunity to review cover letters. In addition to resumes, we saw letters of reference, and we got to see all the feedback sheets from all of the forums, from students, staff, members of the public, parents, all of the constituencies, and we received many emails from various constituencies as well. Some of us spent time with the candidates over lunch or dinner, and two of our members were able to sit on the screening committee, so they were able to see the initial interviews with the candidates as well. So as a group, as a school committee, we have multiple data points to consider and sort of put together as we make our decision this evening. In the interest of all school committee members having the floor tonight, I would like to suggest that we take time to talk about each of the candidates and the attributes they might bring to Beverly. And I was thinking if we work one candidate at a time and in the order they were interviewed. So that would be starting with our first Monday candidate, Ms. Meredith Nadeau. Is that agreeable to the group to work that way? Yes? Yes? Okay. So if we could start with Mr. Milady and tell us what you think about our first candidate, Meredith Nadeau.
Sure. Can I make some thanks too?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. So it's going to be a love fest for a couple minutes. So first of all, I want to say thank you to Dr. Brackett and your team from the Collins Center. I cannot help but emphasize how important it was for you and your team to be with us during this process. We wanted this to be as smooth and as transparent as possible, and you definitely helped make that happen. Choosing the next superintendent is by far the biggest thing that this current school committee has done and probably will ever do. And your guidance and advice was very important, so thank you very much. I also want to recognize the work done by our screening committee. Excuse me, you all gave up large portions of your time and provided us with 3 very strong candidates. Taking time away from work and your families is never easy and can definitely take a toll not just on your lives, but the lives of those around you. Thank you for putting the needs of our students and our schools above your own. I also want to thank you, Chris, and my fellow school committee members. Chris, your leadership and advice during this process has been very helpful for me during the past couple of weeks. While reviewing the notes and watching and rewatching the candidate interviews, I kept thinking about what you would do for your decision, and that no matter what happens tonight, we need to think about putting our students and teachers first. I also want to give a thanks, even though I didn't speak with him, to Mr. Manzo. Paul always took the time to hear me out, and even though he didn't always agree and we didn't always see eye to eye, he at least heard my ideas and my beliefs, so thank you very much, Paul. And then finally, kind of a little bit of a tangent. This happened a little while ago. But during bedtime, I read 2 books to my kids, and one of them was Miss Rumphius, so I don't get paid for endorsing the book. But in the book, the main character, Miss Rumphius, is told as a kid that you must do something to make the world more beautiful. And that is us, fellow school committee members. I couldn't think of a better group of people to be having this stressful and exhilarating time together. I know that we all have some differing opinions on who we like to select or to serve as superintendent, but I do think that you do want to make the world a little bit more beautiful. You want to make our schools a little bit better. And whatever your best interests are, you always have the students and teachers at heart. So thank you very much, and I look forward to a discussion tonight. Last week, my wife pointed out that I tend to think in terms of a narrative. You're definitely noticing that right now. So I wanted to share this epiphany with you because this is how I planned on approaching tonight's meeting. I'm sure my more mathematically gifted and data-driven colleagues on that side of the table have probably a spreadsheet and point system and God knows what. Math is not my strong suit, something Sister Mary Smith, God bless her soul, pointed out to me a long time ago. So a few weeks ago, Dr. Brackett talked to us about the importance of being aware of our own biases. We were advised and encouraged to do more than just keep an open mind through this process, but to consider how our own bias may impact how we view or consider each of the candidates. Our bias could be the allure of something new or the preference for someone familiar. We also needed to consider that because of the proximity we share with one of the candidates, we should not make this a deciding factor in our decision. We may not want to say or do something that could offend or hurt the feelings of a person that we have known for over a decade, and we don't want to squash the dreams and aspirations of a candidate that we've met for the first time. And I truly believe that we did all that. This has not been an easy process for me, but the best decisions, the really important ones, are not supposed to be. So over the past couple of nights of interviews, there was a clear reflection that our candidates have decades of experience in public education. But I felt that there were a few responses that clearly separated one candidate from the other. So I promise I'm going to stick with what you wanted. So, Paul, I loved your question, As superintendent, how would you work to recruit and retain excellent educators to Beverly Public Schools? That's the question I kept circling back to. I'm well into my second decade of being a teacher. I actually started breaking out this week and getting razor burn, so this is a nice combination to relive puberty. Over 40% of my life has been devoted to educating others. This is a question that I considered, Paul, your question. As a teacher, who would I want my future boss to, how would I want them to respond? Then I thought, as a parent, how would I want the chief educator in our city to respond? So I read my notes, watched and rewatched how the candidates responded to your question. I reflected and prayed, and here we are. When asked, as superintendent, how would you work to recruit and retain excellent educators to Beverly Public Schools? Our first candidate began her answer with the need to work collaboratively with our unions. I love the message that sends. Full disclosure, I'm a member of the Massachusetts Teachers Association. I'm also the vice president of the local for my district. However, I believe that's something we all can see the benefit of beginning a new relationship with the next superintendent and the unions to be a strong one for a shared effort to help retain good staff. She also mentioned that there's a need for a more diverse type of professional development opportunities for our staff. Towards the end of her answer to the retaining portion of the question, she answered it was important to give teachers a voice. And I think that shows a tremendous amount of respect for fostering a collaborative culture. In answering Mr. Goodwin's question on all of our candidates touched upon the lack of racial diversity with our staff. My son goes to a school where the teachers, administrators, staff, and other professionals all look like him. My race is something that I do not often think about over the course of my day, and that is part of my white privilege, and I feel it's essential to recognize it and to own it. However, if I was a parent of a child where his or her teachers all look differently from them, I don't doubt there would be a greater sense of concern and urgency on my part on this issue. How are we servicing all of our students if a portion of our student body never has an instructor or an administrator that's of their race? How are we preparing the majority of our students if they leave our schools never having an instructor or an administrator who's a different race of their own? And our first candidate addressed this need for a more diverse staff with an emphasis on recruitment as well. She spoke about the need to reach out to urban settings as well as more diverse locations to help diversify our staff. The emphasis on extending our search beyond our immediate area to address this, going beyond what we already do. Our staff doesn't truly reflect our student population, a factor that I think would help close the achievement gap, as well as promoting social and emotional growth of our students. So those are the two questions I focused on to give me focus for each candidate. Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Milady. Mayor Cahill.
Thank you, Madam President. Excuse me. So I did not prepare remarks along the lines of the way that you want to go through it. So I have prepared remarks which I'll hold. Hours and hours, reams and reams. What I've done since the interviews were completed was to go back and read through all the notes I have on all the candidates, their own materials they presented us at the outset as their application packet, feedback we got from all the feedback forms filled out, the different forums, all of the input outreach that has come from members of the community since, and just kept looking back through all that we had to pour over. In what I read a bit later, I touch on the really, I think, outstanding strengths of all three of the candidates. So I'll save that for then. I've said it, I'll say it again later, and I think we probably all could agree. We've got three outstanding candidates who are all going to be superintendents in Massachusetts within the next year, I would imagine, and I think they'll all do very well. So to try to honor your question, I'm going back and just jotting down a few notes about each one. And so Mrs. Nadeau, Meredith Nadeau is our first candidate. And some of my thoughts as I think of her: thoughtful, compassionate, insightful, a strong intellect, engaging, warm, And then I wrote accomplished, and then I thought, wait a minute, I've already got all these things in here about all three of them. So I'm just going to leave it at there for the moment.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Goodwin?
Okay, thank you. I will do my thank yous, and then I'll give a couple of brief comments about the candidate, if I could, please. So,
Absolutely.
Chris, you kind of stole a lot of my thank yous, but I think it just goes to say how we value a lot of the people that helped out and make this process what it was. So I'd first like to thank you, John, and the Collins Center. I have no clue as to how we would have been so organized and got through this so quickly and recruited so many candidates and vetted them in such a quick and efficient way, and to get down to the 3 candidates we did. Certainly made my job a lot easier tonight to really just have to consider those after you, and a lot of people did the hard work. So thank you. I'd also like to, I'll thank our school committee members who did the extra work as well. So I'll just echo what Chris said in the sake of time, so you all know who put in the extra work and did a lot of the heavy lifting to get us here as well. I'd also like to thank the candidates. They went through a very big process to get to this point with that incredible 12-plus hour marathon interview that I can't even imagine. Going through that, and the shape they were in and the energy that they all had at the end of the night was pretty impressive to see. For most of you who I've seen a lot lately and heard from you for emails or phone calls, thank you so much for weighing in. I say this too many times, but there's about 40,000 other people in this city who either don't know this is going on or don't care, or they're indifferent. And so we may not think alike tonight, but I truly value your input, and please know that your comments were looked at, and if it was something I wasn't aware of, I definitely did the research that I could to try to vet that as much as possible to help me bring me to my decision tonight. Lastly, I'd like to thank BevCam for giving us the opportunity to be able to watch and rewatch the interview process, and especially to give the community the ability to watch. We have to be here. The community doesn't. So I think that was a very beneficial thing for people to not have to try to get here 3 nights in a row. And I think it was a great asset for them to be able to watch that and in turn give us their feedback so we could add that to our decision-making process. So those are my thank yous. Thank you. So as far as Meredith was concerned, just have a few notes here. I'm going to take a little bit higher level view than John so eloquently took. But I think for anyone who got to meet her or hear her speak, especially in person, I don't think you'll find a more passionate, more personable person. She came in at the end of that very long day, and I think was very thoughtful in all her answers, took her time. And I could have listened to her all night. She was very, very, very engaging. She has superintendent experience, so that's a plus. She has that within multiple school districts. She has experience across multiple states. Lorinda and I appreciate this part. She mentioned data a lot. And coming from the computer field, we like that, and we kind of process things that way. So a lot of questions she answered with wanting to get more information, wanting to get more data to be able to process and decide how she was going to move forward. When we sat down and did the profile of the superintendent, we talked about what are our wishes, what do we want. We tossed back and forth, do we require a doctorate or not? And I don't know the exact wording we settled on, but I think it was preferred. But she is working her way towards that goal. So it's nice to see that she is continuing her education to that high level. And then I'll steal a little bit of John's answer, but it was my question, so I guess I'm a little biased, but no, but I really thought she had the best answer to that question, and you know, you can kind of gloss over that pretty easily with just a common answer, but I really thought she was very insightful and kind of thinking out of the box and expanding the global search that she would try to do to bring candidates to us here. So
Thank you.
that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Mrs. Abel?
Oh, sure. So similarly, I have a few opening remarks that are just general. We certainly have 3 experienced candidates that are engaged and have each put themselves out there to be tapped with the awesome responsibility of being our little kiddos' leaders and to be the steward for our district as it moves forward, to maintain our mission and our district improvement plans as they've been so well put together. And we're not looking for someone who's just going to chart the course and get on autopilot and continue going forward, but someone who is going to actively engage at all levels and look to influence the different spheres within our district, to close achievement gaps, to improve our collaborative work, and to prepare our children to be productive and happy people in whatever they choose to do after they leave our doors. So I have to preface my remarks with the observation that this is a very difficult choice for us, since Beverly truly enjoyed a very strong set of applicants. And even through the down selection process, we had very qualified candidates. I had the pleasure of seeing all the applicants through the screening selection, and I have to say, everyone really is already or will be soon a superintendent doing great things in their districts. But what we have before us in this deliberative session, obviously, is to just pick out which one will be doing it here in Beverly on July 1st. So in my process, I returned often to the candidate profile, which was an amalgamation of all the great ideas coming from our community, from our teachers, from our students, from this committee itself. And I've seen the information compiled by our consultant through the screening selection, through the background checks, and I've participated in various conversations. I've rewatched the recordings as well, so thank you to BevCam for making those available to us so quickly and completely. I've revisited my notes, I've tried to do the spreadsheets, and I've done word clouds even, and tried to distill down my thoughts into some consumable and constructive thoughts for this evening to share with you all. And from where I sit tonight, I've had a few opportunities to see the candidates engage with the district, whether I was sitting in the back behind Ms. Montevecchi's hair, just kind of spying to see what kind of questions the community was bringing forth to our candidates and how our candidates responded, to, again, the selection committee and getting to see our candidates not in front of a camera or a large group, but on a more intimate basis answer some of the questions that that group presented. And I think I've seen consistency amongst our candidates and a little bit of inconsistency, and so some of my feedback tonight will come from that lens. And I say lens because I think all 3 of our candidates use that expression in their answers to us publicly about the need to use different lenses as we look at things. So with that, I would like to offer some perspective on our candidate number 1, and looking through my unique lens as second term on the school committee, young kids in the district, and all those other pieces of baggage that come with me. For me, the first candidate impressed me. My impressions were that she has the temperament, the experience, and the knowledge that would be able to step into this role with a certain degree of ease. But she would also bring that fresh perspective of questioning everything. Well, why do you do it that way? She might help our district and leaders discover what are known as blind spots. Sometimes the best of us fall victim to blind spots or unconscious bias or any number of things that we've always done it this way, or this is the best way because this is the way that we're doing things. So I do think that one of the perspectives that she would offer us as her candidacy one of the perspectives she offered was that she was going to look at the data, and I think that's something that you touched on, Paul. She was going to look at data, for instance, and this is one of the salient examples, are our most experienced teachers helping those with the largest achievement gaps, or are our most experienced teachers already assigned to the students that are excelling? I think that was one of the examples. She also offered the example that early education, including pre-K and full-day kindergarten, pays dividends. That is from the social-emotional and from a dollars and cents perspective important to me. She seemed to understand that relationship and the importance. It makes me wonder if she might be the educational leader that finally helps our district join with the majority of school districts in our state to offer a full-day kindergarten without a fee. As I see it now, there's less than 10% that are electing the half-day option, and I think that's for a variety of reasons that may be outside the control of the students and their caregivers. And so I'd like to have someone I know understands the importance of full-day kindergarten. I think one of the most salient explanations this candidate provided was in our selection committee, and I think maybe Mayor Cahill will remember it. I'm not sure if it was as memorable for you as it was for me, but she explained why on her resume she continued to put her EMT experience. And the way I recall her describing is that when you have life and death situations in front of you, it really helps you understand when you're dealing with conflict, confrontation, or difficult conversations, how important it is to listen, be heard, and act appropriately and with calm and confidence, because pretty much every situation that a superintendent is going to deal with, hopefully it's not life and death, but is a situation that with the right approach and the right listening, you can work through. So that was something that really stuck with me. Again, it speaks to her temperament. And in other words, I felt really confident in this candidate that she would not be someone that would shy away from tackling difficult issues. Again, opening our eyes to some blind spots and challenging us to be a better district.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Visnick.
Thank you. I too wanted a moment of a love fest because I don't think that we can ever say thank you enough. Dr. Brackett, I think your guidance has been invaluable to us. I certainly took your challenge to set aside our implicit biases to heart. I'm a tad competitive. And there's nothing that gets me going like a good challenge. So I thank you for that. I wish to thank my fellow school committee members for opening this process to have it so that we had external candidates. I wish to give a huge thank you to all of the community members and parents who took the time to participate in any way that they did. We're all very busy, and it's wonderful to see so many hashtag join the conversation. So if you know me, I put that on my social media posts quite a lot because I do think it's important. I think it's important that we take the time to hear from you. You elected us. We have our own opinions, but at the end of the day, we represent you. So it's invaluable to me to have heard from so many people and to turn around and say, you know, you can't just post on social media and complain. You can't just call me and complain. You need to really make your voice heard, and to see so many people actually take the steps to make that happen. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation this evening in order to review our shared values and the candidate profile that we created as a community and to try to pick the best person to lead our district forward. Relative to Ms. Nadeau, kind of like John's technique, I went to the candidate profile as well as our questions, and I focused on one. I didn't pick yours, Paul, I'm sorry. In fact, I kind of picked my own, and we talked about when we built our questions, if you weren't going to stand behind your own question, then you shouldn't put it forward. So within the candidate profile, we specifically called out quality number 3 is leadership that demonstrates the core values of inclusivity, equity, and social justice. So especially with that piece of our candidate profile in mind, my main concern for our district and thus my main criteria for measuring our candidates is our achievement gap. Now, I was also, before I dive into that, I'll say I was also very struck by Ms. Nadeau's answer about kindergarten, both in the parent forum outside in the CAF there and here. And one of the things that she said that really hit home for me was we would never consider a flat-out policy where we just send our seniors for half a day of school. So why would we consider only a half a day of school for our youngest learners? And it's just really embodied a philosophy around that early education, as well as the social emotional issues that seem to align with what I think we want and need in this district. but really specific to the achievement gap. My question was very narrow. I spoke about the fact that we have a gap here. That gap is mostly based on socioeconomic status, which is not always the norm. Many times the gap is based on race. So it is what it is. We have approximately 25% or 1,100 students who are in that gap. And 1,100 students are performing significantly below their non-economic challenged peers. This gap has existed for some time, and there's little to no change in the gap. One noticeable change in a particular cohort actually shows the gap growing. So our district currently uses differentiated instruction, and that approach is not working. We see that in the data. As you've heard some of my colleagues say, I'm fairly data-driven. I'm a computer nerd for a living. During the day, I have my spreadsheet here. I made a whole bunch of scoring matrices. I actually asked Mr. Brackett if we could try to approach this, Paul, our decisions tonight with just numbers, because that works better for me. Names and faces and emotions, not so much. So, but we have, numerically speaking, we have this gap. It's not going away, and what we're doing right now today is not working. So we need a different approach. And two of our candidates, this particular candidate said, she referenced an expert in the field of the achievement gap, of closing the achievement gap, and that gentleman's techniques are proven to yield results. So from my point of view, our choice is to continue on our current path of using differentiated instruction, a path that's leaving a significant number of children behind, or to go outside and pull in somebody who says they know about another technique, a technique that's proven, and give our children a chance, the very group of children who need our help the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Visnick. Mrs. Ferretti?
Great, thank you. Wow. Being the rookie at the table, this has been just such a learning experience, an amazing experience that I will never forget. And just to join my colleagues' love fest, thank you to all of you here at the table, because I've bounced so many questions off most of you, off some of you sitting out there, and everyone's been fantastic. And this has been an incredible, just inspiring process that I'll certainly never forget. So I too want to thank just Mr. Brackett as well. You organized this down to the letter and made it seem just flawless to us. And I also want to thank all of the candidates, because they certainly put their heart and souls in this process, and that's fantastic. And I mirror what folks have already said, that we can't go wrong with any of these candidates, and they are all fantastic. And this has been an incredibly difficult process to go over each candidate and look at all of the great things that each of them have to offer. I've watched the interviews so many times that all my children know when they come in the room, like, hey, Meredith, hey, there's Sue. And my son Grant likes to say, Charochak. That's fun to say. But needless to say, they're familiar faces in my household right now, and lots to think about. I go back to a meeting we had just before we kind of launched into the next step, and we were at the table talking about how we can crunch this information, what's the best way to come to this decision, what kind of matrix can we create, what data can we crunch. And Mr. Brackett gave a great answer that really spoke to me as a 20-plus year human resources professional. He said, go with your gut. And there is really, these are people, and there's a lot of obviously factual stuff that I've been poring over, resumes, their profiles. But at the end of the day, they're people that are going to lead our people. our little people, my people, your people. And that's been the driving force as I go over and review all of the great things about each of these candidates. So I had the unique experience of being with each of the candidates for an entire day. And I will thank them for motivating me to get my 10-year family vehicle detailed for, for the event. That beef jerky smell has been eliminated, so thank you to all three candidates for that. But all kidding aside, that experience gave me insight to each of those candidates that I truly appreciate and gained a lot of knowledge from. It was an opportunity for me to spend time just in between the transitions with them in the car with some casual conversation and get to know them each on a different level. And also to observe the transitions from each meeting and just kind of see how those were going. So for someone that was not on the committee, and thank you, Mrs. Abel and Mayor Cahill, for pulling that load, because that was a lot of work. We've all done our part, and I was glad to do that piece, and I felt, again, it offered me an insight that certainly helped me get to where I am today. So just to speak to Mrs. Nadeau, I could have spent a week with her. She was very pleasant to speak with. She so informative. She has an amazing background. Her experience in the New Hampshire community certainly would serve us well in Beverly. I think the thing that stuck with me about her after my day with her was her approachability. I feel that whether it be students, administrators, anyone, that she has an open door policy. She is someone that could certainly lead us in an effective way with her background and just her style, her personable nature. And I think that being the one that's kind of bringing up the rear, I would be repeating a lot of things. My colleagues have eloquently prepared so many great things, so I won't go on and on because I know we have 2 more candidates to go through. So I will end with those comments.
Thank you, Mrs. Ferretti. And then I too have some thoughts about Mrs. Nadeau. Mrs. Visnick, you'd be proud of me, I do have a chart. The way I process this is it was really important to me to take that candidate profile that was built by our community and measure our candidates up to that profile. In addition to that, I sort of scored each candidate on how they answered each question. I then went through every single feedback sheet that we got, and I looked at the concerns that our community had about each of the candidates. And then up until probably less than an hour ago, I was sharing out emails to the school committee and reading emails that were coming in fast and furiously over the last couple of days. And Mrs. Nadeau, I found her to hit many of the marks on our leadership profile. I found her to be friendly and personable. I found her to be inclusive in her decision-making, especially with her administration team. And I found her to be very interested in including stakeholders and making sure every voice was heard when it came to the big decisions. I really appreciated her perspective on financial issues. She said something about being a good steward of finances, and I feel like that is our responsibility as a group, as an administration team, and as a superintendent. And yes, she understands data, she likes data, but she did make a comment about that data is just one piece of the picture, and she uses it for learning and growing, and that's the piece that impressed me about her use and knowledge of data. She spoke about focusing on growth for all who work in the district with clear expectations, high expectations, and supporting people. And in my opinion, she appears to be a great leader. She's very smart, she's very positive. And like some of my colleagues echoed, all of our candidates, I think, would serve us well. So that's where I am with my thoughts about Mrs. Nato. Next, we'll move on to our Wednesday candidate, Dr. Trocheck. So we'll turn it back over to Mr. Milady.
Okay, so sticking with Mr. Goodwin's question, as superintendent, how would you work to recruit and retain excellent educators to Beverly Public Schools? Our second candidate spoke about current practices that we have in place right now and our fruitful fellowship partnership with Endicott. In the response, it also included that we are allowed to enculturate them, meaning the fellows. And enculturate them stuck out to me because enculturation means the process by which an individual learns the traditional content of a culture and assimilates its practices and values. Or to put it more plainly, it's when you learn another's culture and then adopt into it. So I may be overthinking it, but to me, enculturation sounds very much like indoctrination. And I don't know if, as a teacher, I would want to work in a district where this was emphasized. I would want to work in a district that doesn't encourage enculturation of its new staff, but it brings in diverse educators from diverse backgrounds with diverse ideas that helps us grow as a district. If our staff is assimilating to a specific mold of teacher, how does this better prepare our students for challenges that are unforeseen when they face down the road? There was also a considerable amount of time in the response emphasizing the importance of, quote, grabbing teacher leaders and providing CAGS opportunities. In our response, it would say we should have a pool ready for administration, future administrative teachers. This would definitely be appealing to some members of our staff. I'm in education, and I've seen it myself. Some people have the goal of going beyond the classroom and going into the front office, so to speak. But I feel that's only a small percentage of teachers would benefit from this philosophy. Most of us in education view our job as a vocation with the goal of decades spent in the classroom. I'm concerned that this statement implies that when administrative opening happens in our district, we're then sending the message that we're not looking beyond our current pool of applicants, and that this belief and approach, which was the path of all our candidates were in the classroom and then they went into get degrees for administrative purposes. However, this isn't going to benefit the majority of our staff. Our goal shouldn't be having a pool ready for future administrators. Our goal is and should be to have a well-trained and well-compensated staff. Where our second candidate, in my opinion, shined in her response when it came to retaining was addressing that we are not competitive with other districts on the salary scale. That is a tough conversation to have. I've also seen firsthand her expression of concern that we would lose good teachers to neighboring districts over compensation. And I think this is a very tough, thoughtful, and honest response. So I appreciated her candid response in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Cahill.
Thank you, Madam President. And just keeping in mind that I'll have more to say in a kind of a different way of looking at it all. For now, Dr. Trocheck, a few descriptors. She's passionate, energetic, accomplished, thoughtful, collaborative, inquisitive, driven to achieve. Two things that, and just thinking of some of the things that she has done or is doing in her professional work, her role a few years ago in helping bring the responsive classroom principles to our elementary schools, which helped our elementary school teachers to set expectations and class norms each year and help to grow our kids' social emotional competencies and create a learning environment that is very productive for our students throughout the year. Also, her work ongoing with the Massachusetts Personalized Learning and Ed Tech Initiative. Her work as the point person for the district, ranging from implementing our high school one-to-one laptop program to building technology into our elementary literacy and math curricula, incorporating technology into all we do, mindful of using technology judiciously and appropriately, something that for all of us, for any educational leader in any district, in any school, is one of the great challenges that that we face, is how to harness technology best and make sure that it's used as the tool that it can be to help kids learn better. So those are a couple things that come to mind and jump out when thinking of the work that she's been doing.
Thank you, Mayor Cahill. Mr. Goodwin?
Okay, thank you. So as far as Mrs. Trocek, so when we first came to this, we had some meetings here on whether we were going to start with an internal search or an external search, and we had some guidance from the MASC as well regarding that. So as we were having those discussions, we had said that we were going to go right to the external search, and that if we had internal candidates that were applying and they were able to make it through that process and rise through, then that would mean much more to us and to the community that they rose through the ranks and were able to come and sit before us. So Dr. Trocek has done that in this instance. While the selection process has been going on for a couple of months for us, really with her, I feel like it's been going on for years, because we've had the added bonus of being able to work with her on a daily basis, weekly basis, sit in on our meetings, sit through some hard budget talks. So to me, I've been able to see her engagement. I've been able to see her organizational skills. I've been able to see her interactions with staff, with teachers, with students, whether it be in our meetings around the schools, at events in the schools. That all means a lot to me. Another thing that means a lot too is she has devoted her career to Beverly. And while, it's a positive when people come with different experiences, I think it says a lot, especially in this day and age when, I'm going to sound old now, but the youth don't stay at jobs often, and they're flip-flopping all over the place. But I think it does matter that someone is invested in a city and has had their career here and has worked their way up through to the level she is at. That does mean a lot. A lot of things have happened during that time, and she's been a part of that. A lot of things, especially with redistricting, a lot of work that went into the new middle school. She was part of that. That means a lot as well. I also think, we're doing a lot of great things here in Beverly, and she has been part of that, and I think there's a lot of value in continuing down that road. She's had great input into that, and I think we should keep moving forward with that. And then I'll just kind of end with, as we were talking about the internal search, a few times it's come up, is it the easy choice? Is it not giving due justice to the process? But we did do that. We did the external search. We had almost 40 candidates. We had 11 that were interviewed. We were down to 3. So I don't really carry much weight with that. We are going to make a change, whether it's the internal candidate or an external candidate that does get accepted tonight, because someone's going to take on a new role. And I think as people have worked through their careers, you understand if you're working and you're not the head person, you do things a certain way, and then once you get to take the reins, you get your chance to make your mark and to really do things the way that you've seen that, gee, maybe I do something a little bit different, and now you can. So that's a good thing as well. And then with that, if she is the person that is accepted tonight, we will get a new assistant superintendent. And then that person's going to bring new roles, supervise new people, and bring new ideas as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. Mrs. Abel?
Sure. So for our second candidate, Dr. Chirocek, my impressions are obviously skewed by the fact that she was the principal at the school where my firstborn took their first day in Beverly Public Schools. And she became the superintendent as I started paying attention to this thing we call school committee. Wow. And so similar to Paul's experience, we've been sort of learning alongside her to some degree and interacting on a weekly, monthly basis. So my experience of having watched her develop in the central office capacity is something that, although through the entire process I've tried not to put too much weight or to treat her differently from other candidates, it sits here and it weighs in the decisions. So my impression through the interview process is that this candidate is both engaging and sometimes polarizing. And people were giving her so many lauds and compliments, and some criticisms and jabs, and I think that some were undeserved, because obviously the buck stops with Dr. Hershey right now, so she can't take credit or fault with the things happening in the district. As Mr. Goodwin explained, you know, it's not her ship to run right now. Dr. Hershey still has the helm. But I think, again, to the lens metaphor that our candidates had used and some of the comments I've received and opinions I've formed on my own. And they lead me to believe that the lens with which we see Dr. Trocheck is sometimes from the candidate's own deep-seated passion for Beverly. As you explained, this is the district where she's committed her career, and it's the only district within she's really worked for this part of her career. So there are so many benefits for selecting a candidate who has such an intimate knowledge from where we've been and where we want to go, and there's an ease in selecting a candidate who knows all the players' names, recognizes the families, and I have seen her recognize heirs' families all the way up through grade 12. You know, she remembers, if not the first names of the kids, she knows the family name. So there's certainly value in that. And this is where I'm having some pause, and it's from some of the feedback we've received that those in our community who know the candidate best are not giving a resounding sound of confidence, and that it might not be the right time to select her as a superintendent. And I know that nothing is guaranteed, and I think and reflect back on some of the words Ms. Trocheck used in the selection committee meeting about how the heirs principalship was the best job ever. I mean, I think that was something that she then tried to explain in her final interview, as the superintendentship is a lot more like being a principal, where you, again, get to take the helm. I wish I could say that there is so much left for her to do in the assistant superintendent role, where she's been doing such an excellent job, and there's so much left for her to do with our young learners in the role the assistant superintendent generally plays in our district, with the academics, with the social emotional learning, with the mentoring for the administrators. And as much as the school committee can't dictate where administrators stay or go, I hope that the candidate recognizes, however this turns out this evening, she is very valued, and the work that she's doing here in our district is extremely valuable. So regardless of tonight's outcomes, there's plenty more work still to be done, and I hope to see Ms. Trocheck as part of that work.
Thank you, Mrs. Abel. Mrs. Visnick.
Thank you. In order to try to answer, just like we asked the same questions to the same candidates, my answer around Dr. Trocheck, I will try to frame in the same, just as I did with Ms. Nadeau. I'll go back to my candidate profile, and specifically the item on social justice, and specifically 3 topics within that, 3 things that I think tie directly to social justice, which is our philosophy on kindergarten, our social emotional learning, and the achievement gap. So I think I would echo a lot of what Rachel said. Dr. Trocheck has a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge, and there is great comfort in the known. And not very many people are happy to embrace change. Her commitment to Beverly is unwavering. You need only look at how long she's been here. As Mr. Goodwin said, I stayed at my last job for upwards of 20 years, and that was a fluke. And I'm going on 5 years at my current job, and that's also a little bit of a fluke. So I think that speaks volumes. I think that there's something to be said for that. So I also tip my cap to her for her continued commitment to her own continuing education. The fact that she went back and got her doctorate degree is incredible to me. The bad part, though, for all those goods is she has the unfortunate disadvantages of owning, for better or for worse, some of our current issues in our district. And we do have issues, and we don't like to necessarily talk about those. We don't want to air our dirty laundry. You know, I say a lot, great things happen in Beverly, Mass., and I do believe that to be true. But we do have the issues that I continue to come back to around the social justice and I was dismayed at the kindergarten response that we don't have data about the benefits of full-day kindergarten. So from a philosophy point of view, I was hoping to hear a different answer. I love the CASTLE program. When we talk about social emotional learning, I think it will serve Beverly very well once we get it rolled out district-wide. But it's very concerning to me that we don't have anything here in this wonderful building for our students here or up at the high school. And as I already mentioned, relative to the achievement gap, Dr. Chirocek's answer was that we would continue to use differentiated instruction, and that has not proven to yield any benefits. So on those three topics, that's my impression of this particular candidate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Ferretti.
All right. So Dr. Chirocek, I first met her actually when she was the principal at Ayers, and I brought my little kindergartner, Grace, who's now ready to join Mrs. Taylor next year. And it seems like yesterday, but she impressed me then, and truth be told, she continues to impress me. The first word that comes to mind when I think of Dr. Chirocek is passion. And anyone who knows her and anyone who's worked with her can see that she has a passion for Beverly and a passion for our kids. Her leadership is, she has a great leadership relationship and a leadership style. As we move through the days of interviews, through all the different interviews, I saw firsthand, just in that quick snapshot, her strong connection to all the leadership throughout the schools and the community. And it was humbling to see. She has worked tremendously hard to get to where she is at this point, from just within her roles throughout the community, throughout the educational system, to getting her doctorate's degree, which she is the only candidate who has that, and I commend her for that. She is an extremely intelligent woman, a funny woman, which spending time with her since joining the school committee, I have had the pleasure of getting to know her. I also need to offer my apologies, because as we started this process, as Mr. Goodwin said, we had a lot of feedback from all of you to make this a national search, and we did that. And because we did that, I think without realizing it, I set the bar higher for Dr. Chirocek. And as I went through the process, and every time I went back to each candidate and reviewed all their answers, without really realizing it, I was holding her to a higher standard. And at the end of the day, she can be held to a higher standard, and she does meet those standards. I have enjoyed working with her, and I do hope to continue working with her in new roles and different challenges. I think she served our community well in many ways, and I think she has many more great things to do if given the opportunity.
Thank you, Mrs. Ferretti. My perspective on Dr. Chirocek is similar. We were criticized for thinking we may just do an internal search, and so hearing from our community, we expanded it out. And one of the things I kept hearing anecdotally was, that Dr. Chirocek would get some special favors or an automatic pass into the final interviews. And that couldn't be more further from the truth. She made it to the final interviews on her own merit. And as my colleague, Mr. Goodwin, said, she was in a group of 35 or so, weaned down to 9, and made it to the top 3. And my understanding is the top 3 was separated from number 4 enough so that we ended up with 3 and not 4 candidates in front of us. So when I did my rubric and I measured her up to our community profile, she also hit many of the marks that our community has asked for in our new superintendency. So some of the things I noted when I went back and looked at the the videos. And again, thank you, BevCam, because sitting here and interviewing a candidate is one thing. Being home in my PJs with my notes and, and my children, like, really, Mom? They call me the BevCam geek. So anyway, it gave me a different perspective of all the candidates from the night I sat here. And also the feedback we got from the feedback sheets gave me a different perspective as well. And one of the things that I noted from the feedback sheets about Dr. Chirocek is, in my opinion, from how I gleaned the information, the people who know her best are our our administrators, teachers, faculty and staff, students, and the tour guides that led her through the district. They had the fewest concerns about her compared to the other candidates. The other candidates, those are the people who had the most concerns. The people in our district had more concerns about the other two candidates. And that was striking to me because, I just found it very informative and helpful in helping in my decision. But I also want to say that Dr. Chirocek expressed her passion when she was here with us, and there's no doubt that she really cares deeply about Beverly and Beverly students and families. I have watched her work intently on district goals and strategic planning, which to me speaks to her vision as our school district goes forward. I have also heard her talking a lot about being reflective, and she encourages others to be reflective in their work. And I can say she has inspired me to be the same when I'm sitting at a curriculum meeting and I'm listening to Mrs. Smith talk about the latest program that she's presenting to us. I leave there reflective about that and thinking about how are we going to, support that as a school committee. She looks very deeply into things, and she said in her interview that she's always looking to learn more, and I believe that's a great sign of a leader. As far as social emotional concerns go, she is committed to measuring competencies and looking at how we prepare teachers to infuse instruction. But I really got a lot of information from her about how she believes in developing relationships between students and teachers. And I think that is where the crux of it is for kids who might be struggling in school. She leads and inspires and motivates the already strong leaders in our district. I also appreciated her longer term at budget planning, and Dr. Hershey has talked about this for 5 years, about how we shouldn't just look at 1 year of the budget, we should look 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road. And in her interview, she talked about that, but she also focused on what is needed first for the students and basing our priorities on that, and then looking at our district improvement plan and seeing what we need to do to get there budgetarily. But she also talked about considering, our priorities based on our students, teachers, principals, and the school committee. She has also been pivotal in bringing our elementary schools to level 1 status by working closely with our principals and teachers to be leaders in their schools. And one of the things she talked about as far as not so much, what I heard was not so much elevating teachers to go into the front office, but I heard more recognizing that classroom teachers can be leaders in their classrooms and they can motivate and inspire their colleagues in the same school. And I see that in action when, she says to me, look at this teacher at this particular school and look at what they're doing in their classroom and look at what they're sharing among the school. So she invests in teachers, she invests in the new teachers and in the fellows, and she looks for opportunities to bring more diversity into recruiting. And she's very dedicated to looking at the whole child, especially when it comes to personalized learning and project-based learning. And, the subject of free full-day kindergarten is a hot topic in our community. And when she spoke about that, in my opinion, she spoke to the reality of what we are up against. We are up against balancing that topic with all the other competing priorities in our district. And, we will have more robust conversations about that as a school committee, but I feel like, what she said about, a superintendent needs to make a plan and stick with it made good sense to me. So there are a lot of things that she said in my mind that brought me to a place of she's a strong leader, and I would be really happy to see what she could do in bringing us into the future. So, that said, moving on to our third candidate, Mr. Milady, what were your thoughts about Mrs. Carboni?
Sure. So, one of her responses to Mr. Goodwin's question that really struck with me was about the importance of nurturing new staff. I liked her philosophy that when teachers are nurtured upon reentry, it's easier to retain and transition them. And then she shared with us a story about how Salem received some grant money, and they used an extra day for new teacher orientation that allowed new teachers to work on their craft. So they would create a lesson, and then their lesson would be observed by fellow teachers, allowing them to get some feedback from some already those teachers who receive professional status, excuse me. Now, whether or not this would be feasible here in Beverly is definitely something that would need to be negotiated and discussed with our bargaining unit, but that was the type of response that I was looking for in a candidate that placed an emphasis on teaching as a craft, not as some sort of stepping stone to a higher position. I also enjoyed the idea of establishing mentoring opportunities and also classroom visitations, because classroom visitations allow the administrator to get a better idea of what's happening in their schools and also get to know the staff, get to know what their strengths are. And I just had a takeaway that there was an appreciation towards fostering and growing staff skills as well as professionalism. So similar, in my mind, how a doctor would make rounds. And I enjoyed that. Our third candidate also emphasized the need to go out actively and recruit candidates of color. She talked about establishing relationships with schools and HR programs from all across the state, and I appreciated that that was going, beyond what the status quo is here in Beverly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Milady. Mayor Cahill.
Thank you, Madam President. So a few descriptors that come to mind with Kate Carboni: thoughtful, driven, well-organized, accomplished, passionate. Couple of things that stuck out about her work she's done or is doing, and Mr. Milady spoke to the new teacher, bringing on board new teachers, and I actually thought all three of our finalists spoke well as to how best to bring new teachers on. The program that Mrs. Carboni was able to put in place in Salem, in part due to a grant that they were able to secure. I really like the sound of that, the 4-day orientation, the opportunities for new teachers to do that lesson planning, to get some real scenario playing in classroom management, and then the emphasis that she put on continued structured and kind of persistent mentoring throughout their first year in school. We know so many new teachers struggle in their very first few months with how to manage a classroom and how to plan well and how to deliver effective lessons. So that was good to hear. And also her discussion about the piloting of several social emotional learning models that they've done in Salem and their current preparation to, I think she talked about they were preparing to select one and implement one from the several they piloted. So both of those stuck out with me.
Thank you, Mayor Cahill. Mr. Goodwin.
Okay, thank you. So for me, with Mrs. Carboni, like was already mentioned a couple of times, I like the way that she mentioned the grants that she had attained for Salem, and it seemed like she had a nice kind of out-of-the-box way of coming up with the funds or to look at programs and be able to introduce them into that city. I also thought it was great experience that she worked for the Mass DESE. So that's some real-world experience, and I thought having that perspective, especially as a superintendent, would be very beneficial to the town or city. She, like Mrs. Nato, comes from a history of multiple school districts, multiple states, so that's also a value. And then equity came up as a theme amongst a lot of her answers, and I really appreciated that. And then I think her one thing that she has over the other candidates that stood out most for me, she has a neat perspective of being a Beverly resident, She has a daughter that graduated with some of our sons and daughters last year. And being a parent whose kids have gone all the way through kindergarten, through the high school, and now beyond, I think we have a unique perspective on all the challenges that are met on every single step of the way in the education process here in town. And we've seen it from the beginning all the way up through the end, and the good things and the bad things. And I think that gives her a very unique perspective, seeing it in the town that she would like to be superintendent in.
Thank you. Mrs. Abel?
Sure. So for the third candidate, Ms. Carbone, I was impressed with what she could offer us, as Mr. Goodwin said, as a resident of the city and as a parent of a graduate from our district, and as someone who's in a current leadership role just over the bridge in our neighboring community. I think I echo some of the points that Mayor Cahill brought up, that she brought to the table. My reservations do come with whether she's a match to the statements in our candidate profile. I found a fewer direct matches from some of her answers. And while in the down selection process, she offered us some really good examples that resonated with me, and I didn't see those carry through. So I wasn't as confident that the representations that maybe she made were as good a match as they could have been. So with that said, I think this candidate will make an excellent superintendent, but I'm less convinced that she's a match at this time for us.
Thank you. Mrs. Visnick?
Thank you. So I'm going to basically contradict everything about my logical, data-driven self and tell you that when I met Ms. Carboni, I had like that gut reaction that Ms. Ferretti talks about. I had like the book Blink in that moment of first impression. Something about her struck me as a leader. She held herself well. I just really got a great first impression that she's strong, that she is a leader. I thought the way she handled herself in the parent forum was impressive. I did make myself available to not just eat dinner with each of the candidates each of the nights, but then sit in the parent forum. And there was some very interesting data that came from each of those parent forums, both from the answers, the questions actually that the parents asked, and then how the candidates handled those. And I found her answers to the parent questions in the parent forum to be very, very nice. I thought she handled it very well, even though it got a little testy. So I think there are goods and bads about living in the community in which you lead the district. So I think that's a little bit of a concern, and maybe it's an unfounded one, but we've had that situation once in the past, and my history buff friend down there at the end of the table will tell you that there's some quote about if you don't remember history, you're doomed to repeat it. I probably boogered that up a little bit, but I'm close enough, right? Okay. So, but again, trying to just compare apples to apples, I come back to our candidate profile and the issues on social justice. Relative to kindergarten, both my own impression and the impression of several of the pieces of feedback that we got from our community, I'm not quite sure that this candidate understood the issues that we have in our community relative to kindergarten. I thought her answers on the social emotional learning were fine. Nothing jumped up on the positive or the negative. Relative to the achievement gap, I loved her comments about high expectations. It is true that we need to expect every single child to achieve at a high level. If you accept less and you expect less, then they will match that lowering of the bar. I did like that portion of her answer. However, the bulk of her response to how do we close the achievement gap was to use differentiated instruction. And again, it sounds like I'm beating a really dead horse, but we have 1,100 students here in our district that are in a gap, and that gap is not closing. So that was my impression of Ms. Carbone E.
Thank you, Mrs. Visnick. Mrs. Ferretti?
Thank you. I think what stuck out me at out most about Kate Carboni is her strong leadership. She, as Mrs. Visnick said, it's something you sense as soon as you meet her. She holds herself well. She has that leadership quality right when you meet her, and she is clearly proving that in Salem. She has her work cut out for her across the bridge, and from what we gather, she's doing a fantastic job. I really do like, as some colleagues have already said, the experience she has both with the state as well as a neighboring community. I think that offers a unique perspective in a candidate. I do think she has a lot of great skills to offer a role such as this. Not sure if she is the right fit for Beverly, but she will not remain an assistant for long, I'm sure.
Thank you, Mrs. Freddy. My impressions of Mrs. Carboni were very similar. I felt like she was a very strong leader. When I measured her up to the community profile, she hit many of the marks, but she hit opposite marks from our previous two candidates, which I thought was interesting. There were some things that she said in her interview that I thought were very good and would be helpful and be fine attributes for a superintendent in Beverly. She talked about leading improvements in core instruction, and she believes in high-quality instruction. I agree with Mrs. Visnick's statement about how she believes in high expectations for all and not scaling back or scaling down for some, but making sure that the curriculum is accessible for all. She understands, or she appeared to understand, what it takes to reach every student and being able to identify those in need or who need more, and to be ready for them and be ready to re-engage students and to support their learning. One of the things that struck me about her, too, is that she is dedicated to fiscal responsibility and aligning district priorities with the budget, which I know we've worked on here, and that sort of resonated with me. She also understood what was needed for a successful co-teaching model, which Ms. Spolansky knows I've been asking for that in our district for a long time, and so happy to see it here now. When she talked about what she saw here, I was happy to see that she recognized a lot of the things that make a good co-teaching model, but she also had some other good ideas for us, too. And she, again, like the others, is interested in bringing stakeholders to the table, working with, creating community engagement to work through strategic planning. And one of the things that she talked about, too, was celebrating success, which I think is important, in every school district. I always say I wish we had a public relations position in our district so that we could have somebody who really pumps out the good news. So those are my thoughts about Mrs. Carboni. So, yes.
At this time, I don't know if it's appropriate to do so, but I'd like to make a motion to extend the offer for superintendent to Dr. Suzanne Chirocek and enter into contract negotiation.
Okay, so it's appropriate. I mean, that's the next step, is to make a motion, and then, do we have a second? I'll second that for the sake of
You're
discussion.
turning on my microphone.
Oh, okay.
Madam President, could
Do you,
could I make a couple comments? Then I have a statement that I prepared
okay.
that I,
So we'll hold the motion. I made the second.
Okay.
well, I mean, the motion's been seconded, now it's discussion time.
Yeah, so go ahead and discuss, Mayor Cahill.
Thank you. First, as I said, I prepared a statement a little differently from the way Madam President asked the question. And with that said, I then, tried to grab a couple thoughts from each of the candidates. Given that we spoke about Mrs. NATO first, I didn't have as much time, so I do want to share just I guess it's not really a story. We were all here for it. It was in the interview. But when Mrs. Nadeau was asked the question about what was that? Mrs. Freddie, your best mistake, your greatest mistake, your
Yes, your
most
best
fortunate
mistake.
mistake? You know, it's a hard question for anybody to answer. I really enjoyed her answer. If you weren't here or don't remember it, she said that when she was beginning to roll out full-day kindergarten, I think this was in Cape Elizabeth, right, in her first superintendency, excuse me, and she said, I threw it out there, and it was it was met with some frustration because there was more demand than I might have anticipated. And the way she explained what happened, she said, I was a second-year superintendent who'd had a great first year, and I was rolling into my second year, and wow, you know, I'm kind of paraphrasing, but, you know, kind of got taken off guard. And what she took from it was great. It was, you know, I learned that I really didn't know as much as I thought, and again, this is me paraphrasing, and it was really important to do my research and to go ask and listen to the community. And I thought that was indicative of some of what she brings. As Mrs. Abel said, she and I were really, I think, honored and lucky to be able to serve in the screening committee. So we got to interview each of the finalists twice, in the first round and the second round. We got to hear lots of answers to lots of questions, not just by the three finalists, but by everybody we interviewed in the first round. There were a lot of fantastic answers, and among our three finalists, there were some really great answers. And since nobody's perfect, none of our three finalists answered every question they were asked in those two rounds, you know, to any one person's satisfaction. And I guess that's because we're human. I'll say another thing is, I feel like I've learned an incredible amount through this process, and I think we're really, we as a community and as a school district are going to take a lot of positives from what's all been shared and what we've all learned as a group, and any number of us as individuals. I'm losing my train here. I don't want to go to reading quite yet because I had a couple of other thoughts, but I guess I know, the point being, when we moved the three finalists forward to be finalists, I was excited as could be, and a little bit scared because they're all really impressive. And, you know, we can't go wrong in a sense, and it's more, you know, who is going to be the best fit, who's right for us at this time, and we're all grappling with that, and we're not all coming to the same place. Certainly not everybody in this room, not everybody at this table. I'm just guessing. But that led to, you know, it was challenging. I kept trying to remove one from the mix and see if I could focus on two, and just couldn't quite do that. I got to where I was thinking, geez, could we just hire all three? Obviously we can't. Then maybe we could hire at least two, because there's a lot of talent among these three women, and they will all do exceedingly well. That said, in working through this whole process, I came to my decision somewhere around mid-afternoon yesterday, and so I set about trying to put to paper my rationale and my thinking, because people deserve to hear it, which I think is why I ended up focused so much on getting these thoughts down. So if I could now, I'd like to share them. So like everybody, I have some thanks I want to make, and I want to first thank Mr. John Brackett and his colleague, Mr. Roy Shirtcliffe from the UMass Boston Collins Center. Your professionalism, your wise guidance, your candor, your good humor and goodwill, and your patience with all of us has helped shape a fantastic process, during which I've learned a great deal and from which our community has benefited and will benefit immensely. From the beginning of the superintendent search process, working with Mr. Brackett and Mr. Shirtcliffe, I have endeavored to bring an open and inquisitive mind to all consideration of all candidates and to every deliberation. I've been privileged and fortunate to have served on the screening selection committee with 12 other good people representative of our community. We were tasked with reviewing all applicants, then conducting and considering a deep lineup of first-round interviewees, then selecting finalists from that group. We all put in many hours of research and consideration of all the candidates and participated in numerous meetings, all with open minds and good faith. I am grateful to the members of the screening committee for the integrity they brought to this effort and the high quality of the work the group accomplished together. In moving forward with the 3 finalists, Meredith Nadeau, Mary Catherine Carboni, and Dr. Suzanne Chirocek, it was clear to me that my school committee colleagues and I would have 3 outstanding candidates from whom to select our next superintendent of schools. All 3 women are thoughtful, intelligent, passionate, and committed educators. All 3 women bring insight, creativity, and a thirst for learning to their work. All 3 women possess the requisite experience and skills. All will very likely become superintendents in Massachusetts in the coming year, and I anticipate that each one of these women will achieve significant success in these roles. I was excited to learn more about each of our finalists, and as would be expected of anyone in my position, with full respect for all 3 finalists and everyone who has participated in this process and everyone who has an interest and a stake in the outcome, I entered into the final round open to any of the 3 rising to the top and excited for our children and our community. Before sharing my decision on which finalist to support as our next superintendent of schools, I want to note that I have read carefully each email that has been sent to me throughout this process. I'm incredibly grateful for the time so many members of our community have invested and the care they have brought to their consideration, and for the level of community engagement that this process has inspired. I have learned much through this process, as much outstanding work going on in our district has been highlighted, and as areas for attention and improvement have been identified and brought better into focus. There are important lessons we can all take from a process like this, and insightful ideas we can and will carry with us for our work ahead. While all 3 finalists have put their best foot forward and conducted themselves admirably and professionally, and have reaffirmed my belief that they are all educators of high quality, for me, as I look at tonight's decision, Dr. Suzanne Chirocek is the candidate who has risen to the top. Dr. Chirocek has impressed me throughout this process. She has and continues to challenge herself and those she works with to look beyond the familiar. She works hard to stay current in the ever-evolving world of 21st century learning. She has been a leader in early literacy, in creating strong, standards-driven, yet nurturing, safe, productive learning environments. Her role in helping to bring the responsive classroom model to Beverly and participating in its successful implementation and incorporation into our schools has improved learning for thousands of Beverly school children. Dr. Chirocek has consistently embraced opportunities to broaden and enrich her own professional knowledge of how to best educate children. She has participated as Beverly Public Schools lead with MAPLE, the Massachusetts Personalized Learning EdTech Initiative, headlining our district's successful and widely recognized efforts to deploy technology as a resource to help maximize the benefits of differentiated instruction, facilitating the strategy of pacing, helping students who would otherwise be left behind to remediate their skills through online learning, while similarly helping students ready for more challenging lessons to advance more quickly in their skills development, a technique specifically targeted to get us beyond where we can get otherwise through differentiated instruction. I know Mrs. Visnick has referenced that, which has its value, and then there's times where you just need more, and this is an example of how the more comes in to play. Over several years, and representing much personal effort and professional growth, she has successfully completed her Doctorate of Education in Educational Leadership at Boston College, making Dr. Chirocek the only one as of yet of our finalists to have earned the title of Doctor of Education. She has led and participated in numerous collaborative efforts in her roles as principal and as assistant superintendent. Much of what we are doing today in Beverly is innovative and cutting edge, and Dr. Chirocek is an integral part of this. Other school districts near and far look to us as a model. Can we do much more? Of course, and we will need to in order to do right by our students. I believe that Dr. Chirocek is best positioned to work in concert with our other building and district educational leaders to challenge themselves and each other and us as a school committee to identify and vet the next innovation and the next, and to build on the Beverly Public Schools' current capabilities and stature. I want sustained greatness for our schools, for our community, for our educational professionals and mostly for our children. I believe that Dr. Chirochik has the ability and will, in fact, bring a fresh and renewed scrutiny of what we are doing and where we should move next as a district. I have confidence Dr. Chirochik can lead our district on this upward trajectory. As Assistant Superintendent, Dr. Chirochik helped establish teacher-led professional development in our district. She has been part of the team led by Dr. Hershey that has endeavored to engage and empower our teachers and staff as educational leaders. She has gained valuable experience over the last several years in building and managing budgets and in collective bargaining, including her work to improve professional growth pathways for our teachers through the development and negotiation of a new tuition reimbursement and teacher leadership development model. She has forged strong, productive relationships with Beverly Public Schools personnel and with students and families throughout the district. Dr. Chirochik's record and her interactions and interviews throughout the hiring process have reinforced for me her commitment to providing all our children the very best academic and social emotional learning and growth opportunities we as a community can provide. As a district, we are working with the Social Emotional Learning Alliance for Massachusetts. We have adopted the CASEL, or Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning curriculum frameworks, which are based on students developing 5 core social emotional competencies, as Dr. Chirochik referenced during her interview. These competencies being self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. As a district, we are working to embed this framework into our professional development and our curricula throughout all grade levels. Dr. Chirochik is helping to lead this effort and is well-positioned to deliver on its promise. In my 5+ years as mayor of our great city, I have spent many, many hours in our schools, in our classrooms, observing how our schools' personnel teach our kids. I have seen the impact of strong, confident central leadership and how it empowers building-level leadership and great instruction by our principals, coaches, counselors, teachers, and paraprofessionals. I have seen how our strong and evolving standards-based curricula, our outstanding and always improving instruction, our social emotional learning, our professional development, much of it teacher-designed and led, our effective and continuously improving utilization of technology, our growing commitment to project-based learning and other forms of personalized learning, our ongoing focus on trying to provide all our children with the best and most inclusive possible instruction in the least restrictive environment, all work together to provide more and better learning opportunities for our children. I see these things happening in our schools every day. Not perfectly, not without areas to improve, and Dr. Chirochik and our faculty know this, but thoughtfully and with intention, always guided by what is best for our children. Further, I see school leadership who I believe are firmly and enthusiastically in Dr. Chirochik's corner, for I believe the right reasons. School leaders who believe in Dr. Chirochik because they share the excitement at the many wonderful things happening in our schools. They share a commitment to keep these positives going, and they share a commitment to never stop growing and improving upon what is in place today. I believe they believe that Dr. Chirochik plays a big role in our successes and our ongoing positive momentum. I believe they have the right partner in Dr. Chirochik to collaboratively move this school district to the next level of sustained educational and developmental greatness. When I look at Dr. Chirochik's accomplishment during her career, I see a principal who took the reins and led the Ayers-Ryleside Elementary School from a Level 3 needs improvement school to a Level 1 high-performing school. I see her ongoing work to strengthen our district's curricula and our instructional models. I see her work ethic and her passion for excellence. I see the purposeful path that she has traveled to be before us tonight, poised to lead, poised to give her all to help our Beverly Public School children learn, grow, and achieve to their utmost potential. Dr. Chirochik's passion is evident. Her skills and experience are considerable. In my eyes, she has met this challenge and she has earned this opportunity. With gratitude to our other two finalists and to the many good people throughout our community who have invested their time and talents and have in good faith weighed in during the evaluation and hiring process, I will respectfully and enthusiastically tonight vote to offer the position as our next superintendent of the Beverly Public Schools to Dr. Suzanne Chirocik. Madam President, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Abel?
Sure. So thank you, Mayor Cahill, for those thoughts. I have to admit that I'm a bit disappointed that we had committed at our last meeting to making sure that we listened to each other's reflections on the candidates and that we not rush to a motion to appoint a certain candidate. And I have to admit that I'm a bit disappointed. I know nature calls, but the mayor did leave the table while Mr. Goodwin and I were actually reflecting on this candidate. So to that, I feel that we had outlined a process for this consideration, that we were going to be respectful and listen to each other's comments. I appreciate all the comments that you prepared in advance when you came to your decision yesterday. But I just wanted to highlight that for the professional consideration that we all agreed to in our last meeting, I find it highly disrespectful that you didn't listen to us as you left the room and you then came in with all of those comments that you had basically prepared in advance. Not to say that they're without merit, but I just wanted to call that out since we had spent so much time at our last meeting talking about the professionalism we would be showing tonight.
Madam President, if I could,
Yes.
should I have asked for a recess when I left? I apologize that I didn't do that. I'm happy to ask Madam President to ask you to each repeat your comments if you'd like. I will say that I never would have, and I'm sure that I did not, agree to come in here tonight without having made my mind up which way to vote. I think that would have not, I don't,
I think
that
it's
would have necessarily
the
worked
listening.
well.
Yes, but, okay.
I mean, this is a process. We've all undertaken a lot here, and we've all gone through our own process. You've heard it this evening. We all think differently. We've all looked to different rubrics, different parts of this process to help inform our decision. But yes, I would not have said that I would come in here tonight without having been ready to vote for one person.
Just wanted to make it known. Thanks.
Mr. Milady?
Thank you. So I have some comments too, but I didn't go to Middlebury, so they're not typed, so just bear with me. So first of all, I want to say thank you to Dr. Hershey. I know it's cliche, but you're leaving some big shoes to fill. Thank you for helping to foster a culture where members of the faculty, the staff, as well as parents or other members of the community are comfortable with coming to these meetings and sharing their opinions. I want to thank you to all the members of the community who sent emails, text messages, cornered me at that birthday party at the YMCA. Thank you for coming to these various meetings, and for those of you who are too sick to come to this one tonight, I hope you feel better. This process has definitely highlighted one of our city's greatest strengths, and that is our concerned public. And it just reinforces the reason why many of us choose Beverly as our home and why we're choosing to send our kids to Beverly Public Schools. So for those of you in the audience tonight, for those of you who watched at home or regretting watching at home, you understand the gravity of this next step, and you can see how it's propelling us to a better future. So I mentioned earlier that Sister Mary Smith said I wasn't good at math, but I pretty much figured out this math problem right now. And there are some of us who are going to go home tonight, and our number one choice isn't going to get picked. And we need to keep in mind that this candidate's success is directly connected to the success of our kids, the success of our staff, the success of our schools. And we also heard and saw some new faces than our usual cast of characters. And Gavin, see you all the time. But I was happy to hear from some new people. And for those new people, stay involved, stay connected. I know some of you, I see you, I recognize your faces. You already volunteer for our PTOs. We'll consider volunteering for our subcommittees. Sometimes Jean brings cookies. And I mentioned that I read 2 books at bedtime. Jack picked Miss Rumphius. Teddy picked The Lorax, which is always good to read the Lorax while you're doing a Bernie Sanders impression because schluppity schlupp sounds good with a Brooklyn accent. But the quote in the book that I like is, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Everyone at this table is up for re-election. So consider running for office. If you're not happy with the outcome tonight, we all need good people. We need good people in our city. You've already showed that you're good people. I want to thank you all for tonight. I don't think any of the comments that I have set aside would be really useful at this point in time in continuing the conversation forward. I want to thank all my fellow committee members for your thoughtful responses, and I yield my time.
Thank you. Mrs. Visnick.
So I think that I often turn that off, so I don't want Kim yelling at me in the BevCam booth. I think that we are all stronger when we bring our differing opinions to the table, and we share, and we listen, and we debate. We each have our own different strengths and weaknesses, and I don't expect anyone at this table to understand all the complicated pieces that go into the topic that I find to be most important, the achievement gap, and I don't claim to understand all those pieces myself. However, I have thrown myself wholeheartedly into an investment process trying to learn and understand. I formulated my questions carefully to be able to peel back or dig deep into the candidates' approaches, and I just continue to be drawn back to our profile. What we said collectively, our community felt was important. And there was only one candidate that brought forward an answer to the achievement gap question that has a chance to actually move the needle to close the gap for our 1,100 or so students that are in that gap. That is a staggering number. If we wish to listen to the copious amounts of feedback from our community, both the double number of endorsements for Mrs. Nadeau compared to any other candidate, as well as the incredible number of calls for change of direction to be able to try to address some of our biggest challenges. And if we look at the answer to that question on closing the achievement gap, then there really is only one candidate for us to choose logically, and that candidate is Mrs. Nadeau. How much sense does it make for us to continue to do what we've been doing? That is the definition of insanity. You keep doing the same thing and you expect different results. What if we continue on the same path? And what if the people that it hurts are the people with the least power to affect the changes that might allow them to flourish? What if those people are 1,100 children in grades K to 12 who live right here, right now? Because that's what it is. And what if each of us had the power to try to help them by choosing not to do what we've been doing? What if we were the Lorax? What if that power was found in our individual vote? The fact of the matter is, it is. I yield my time, Madam President.
Thank you, Mrs. Visnick. Mrs. Ferretti.
Sorry, I just want to say one thing before we vote. Like Mayor Cahill, I feel the process is not at this table tonight. I feel it has been ongoing for the past several weeks. At least for me, it has. Many sleepless nights and a lot of poring over lots of candidate profiles, interviews, and data. And I do feel that we were all respectful this evening and listened to each of us speak about each of the three final candidates. And I'm thankful for that. And I certainly had an open mind, but like Mayor Cahill, I did come to the table tonight with a fairly firm decision, and I feel I would have been irresponsible if I had come completely not decisive at all. I feel I wouldn't be serving all the constituents that have been reaching out to me over the last several weeks. I had a duty to them, to the children, to myself, and to all of you to come prepared this evening. And much like Mrs. Visnick, I have been getting overwhelming feedback from the community in support of Dr. Trochak, and I need to listen to those folks as well. I did not lobby them to send everything in emails to Madam President. I probably should have, so we could have tallied up all the numbers. But I know, I'm confident in my motion, and I'm confident in my vote, so.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Goodwin?
Thank you. So I'll stand by the comments that I made on the three candidates previously, and I just want to thank my fellow committee members over the last few weeks. I know we voted on many things over the past number of years, and we always say this is the biggest job we have here, and I know I really felt the weight of this, and I hope I'm not overstepping to divulge it. I know that all of you did as well, and that you understand what's at stake tonight. And so I'll stand by my comments earlier. I don't want to rehash them right now, but I'll just leave it with, and I don't want to paraphrase because I will get it wrong, but if anyone wants to go, and I'll get BevCam's clicks up a little bit more. The last question that we asked each candidate at the end of the night, their closing statement, and why Beverly, to me, and I'm not summing up my decision based on one question, but it just kind of paraphrases the whole wealth of information that I've been collecting over the last few weeks. But if you go back and look at those three candidates and their statements at the end and why they wanted this job, to me, there was one that just stood head and shoulders above the rest, and really had a vigor and a desire and a passion to accept that position. So thank you.
Okay. Mayor Cahill?
Madam President, thank you. Obviously, we're going to vote in a few minutes or at some point, and that vote may decide the night, and it may not. I think I just want to say, when I said that I've learned a lot through this process, what I mean is, we know there are a lot of great things going on in our schools, and this process helped to bring some of them into focus. We also have a sense that there are things that need to be better, and some of the engagement that the community has brought to this has helped to bring some of those issues into better focus and has identified new ones that need some attention. So, I'm very sincere and determined that the things that have come out through this process are things that we should collectively talk more about how to address better, and talk more with our next superintendent. And with Dr. Hershey, because he's still got a few months. And I know that obviously we all feel passionate about who we believe is the right person to take the helm next. It may be, for some of us, it's these issues more than those, but I think for all of us, it's all of the issues matter, and I think we want to see them all addressed effectively. So I just want to say, I'm looking forward to taking and digging into those issues and seeing how we can positively address and move forward together with things that have come to light and are of concern. Are of concern, and we, first thing is to look more closely and say, okay, how much should we be concerned with something that's been raised? And, is it something that we need to collectively figure out how to address more effectively? And it's a great opportunity, I think. I think that's a part of why this process is so valuable. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mayor Cahill. Anyone else? Okay, well, I have a few words to say. Each time I've been on the side of having to vote for a superintendent, it does weigh heavily on my mind. And like Mrs. Ferretti said, there are a lot of sleepless nights. It's those things you stay awake at night and start processing and think, this is really a huge decision. This appointment will not only affect our school district, but it affects the health of our city going forward. I am a proponent of keeping our school district moving forward in a way that is long sustainable. I'm interested in a candidate who I believe will be able to continue to provide the momentum that our students need to succeed, and our teachers and staff need to be motivated and inspired to stay within the district. I think we have terrific staff and teachers, and I really think it's important to motivate and inspire them to stay with us. I base my decision on the many layers and the many issues of our district, and I look at the district as a whole. And listening to our candidates, it's apparent, and trying to even cull down all the questions that the school committee had for these three candidates was a challenge in and of itself, because there's so many layers to education, there's so many layers to our district. I spoke about the positive attributes I think all of the candidates have, and I think they're all very qualified for the position. But when I'm considering the best person to lead our school district, I think the best is here. I think, I'm convinced that our schools are heading in the right direction. I agree that there's work to be done. There's always improvement to be made, but I believe that Dr. Churchek sees that, and she knows which things she needs to focus on. I believe that Dr. Churchek is the right fit for our district, and I think she has the passion and the drive to keep us going forward. So, if there's nothing else that anybody wants to share at this moment, Mrs. Posca, we would have to do a roll call vote here. I forgot to warn you about that. Okay. So we have a motion on the table to appoint Dr. Churchek and enter into contract negotiations with her. That's pretty close to the legal motion that we need to make. And it was seconded by, the motion was brought forth by Mrs. Ferretti and seconded by me.
Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Chris Silverstein,
Yes.
John Lady,
No.
Paul Goodwin,
Yes.
Mayor Cahill,
Yes.
Linda Bisnet,
No?
and Kelly Ferretti.
Yes.
Do I get a vote?
Rachel?
No.
Madam President?
Yes, Mayor Cahill.
If I could, I know that we talked about this during the process, that it's considered good form and is typically done that there be a second motion offered, and the school committee given an opportunity to express unanimous support now for the candidate that is going to be offered the position. How is that motion best made?
So I would like to entertain a motion to reconsider, to put our collective support behind the superintendent-elect.
Then I'll make that motion to reconsider.
Thank you, Mayor Cahill.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Ferretti.
Now, is the vote first yes to reconsider? No, not to how does this work?
Yes, yes to reconsider.
And then put it up. So it's two more votes. It's a vote to reconsider now, and then a vote to make the prior vote unanimous. No,
The
they're not two
reconsideration
separate.
will either make it unanimous or not.
So voting yes in reconsideration is a vote to make unanimous the selection of Dr. Chirocek.
Not all school committees end up unanimous.
Understood.
Okay. So a vote to reconsider, everybody has the right to vote whichever way they want to vote.
So if somebody votes yes to reconsider, they're voting,
To support the superintendent-elect in their position once. Right, thank you, and to support the decision of the school committee. So we have a motion on the table and we have a second.
We have time for discussion.
We do, yes.
I have, I guess it's more of a comment to two of our other candidates. Ms. Nadeau and Ms. Carboni. I am not familiar with what your personal or financial lives were like that could have been an inhibitor for you getting your PhD. I think any district that ignores or chooses to ignore any candidate who does not have a PhD is missing out. From my own personal experiences, getting my master's was a financial burden. I think Dr. Chirocek had her personal life, her kids, I'm assuming, were older when she started her program. I think financially she had an advantage getting her PhD that maybe other candidates did not have with the district that they worked in. My mom didn't graduate college until 3 years ago, and she is currently wrapping up her master's. So I just want to say to those candidates who are watching, best of luck to you. I don't think that was the deciding factor for anybody, but I want to, there wasn't, I know, but I'm telling them, but that wasn't a bias.
Thank you, Mr. Mulady. Anybody else? Mrs. Visnick?
I'd like to make it very clear that I fully support the will of our body. I understand and respect the choice of the committee. However, I will not be changing my vote. I feel very strongly that the issues of inequity in our district, those that are directly related to social justice, cannot be served by continuing with the same approach as we have been taking. It is our moral imperative to serve all children. As I've said many times this evening, we have 1,100 children approximately that are not getting what they need. I am prepared to continue to be 100% committed to serving in my role, doing my homework, and working as hard as I can to serve the children of our district the best of my abilities. However, my vote stands as previously recorded.
Thank you. Mrs. Abel.
Right. I similarly have a conviction that what would be best for our district includes some outside perspective, looking for blind spots. And although I do believe all three candidates would have provided an excellent superintendent, or would provide to be an excellent superintendent, I similarly am standing with my original vote.
Thank you, Mrs. Abel. Mr. Milady.
I made the promise a couple of weeks ago that if the motion to reconsider came forward, that I would vote yes. I'm just going to stand by my promise because I gave my word and I'm going to stand by it.
Thank you, Mr. Milady. Anybody else? Mayor Cahill.
Madam President, I apologize, but I'm, in trying to understand what we are voting, I've always understood procedurally that a vote to reconsider can only be offered by the side that was in the majority in the prior, in the prior vote. And it's typically, the vote is taken to end any possibility that it would come back up. So in other words, the vote should be a no, so that the vote to approve the motion to offer Dr. Trocheck the position doesn't come back up for reconsideration. See, the reconsideration vote is supposed to be no, so that the issue is done. That's why I questioned why we were moving reconsideration. So I would rather rescind my motion and then have us make a new motion.
I'm listening.
The new motion would be, in an effort to show support to Dr. Trocheck as she'll be offered the position, we take another vote to try to show unanimous support. Now, I recognize, based on what my colleagues have said, that sounds like it'll be a 5-2 vote, not a 4-3 vote, not a 7-0 vote. But I think that's what we're looking to show, is a greater degree of support. So I'd like to rescind my motion to reconsider. I don't think that accomplishes what we're looking to do.
Okay.
And if it's-
Second?
Thank you, Mrs. Ferretti.
And if it's okay, I'll make a motion that we vote again to show, and now that Dr. Trocheck has achieved the 4 votes necessary to be offered the position, I move we vote again to show as great a degree of support as a body as we can for this decision.
Second.
Okay. We have, Mrs. Posca, do you have that motion?
Sorry.
Motion to show a greater degree of support, Dr. Trocheck, Superintendent?
Let me reword it. Motion to again approve offering Dr. Trocheck the position.
With a greater degree of support.
Okay, wait a minute.
What?
Yeah.
Are we okay?
I don't know.
We have a,
I'm getting unsolicited advice on how to procedurally do this
Okay.
the right way.
you confuse me. Okay, so you rescinded your previous motion. We have a new motion on the table, seconded by Mrs. Ferretti, to again approve Dr. Trocheck in the position of superintendent with as great a degree of support as possible from the school committee. Yes? Okay,
It's not artfully worded, but
well, it's
yes.
the best we got right now.
Yep. Well, they were my words. I'm not criticizing
Is there
your
any,
your words.
is there any more discussion on this motion? Okay, another roll call vote, please, Mrs. Pasco?
Ms. Silverstein?
Yes.
Mr. Malady?
Stay.
Ms. Abel?
No.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Mayor Cahill?
Yes.
Ms. Bisnick?
No?
And Ms. Fry?
Yes.
So the motion passes 4 to 2 to 1. Okay. Is there anything else that anybody has for our meeting this evening? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Malady. Is there a
Second.
second? Thank you, everybody. Meeting adjourned.